Hi guys, welcome to my channel. My name's Samantha and I make videos on minimalism, productivity, my low by no buy lifestyle, intentional living and wealth building. And today I'm going to share with you 50 ways to live below your means. I started my frugal living and minimalism journey back in the beginning of 2019. So it's been nearly 2 years, and within that time I've managed to save alongside my husband £40,000, which translates to roughly over $50,000. And that amount of money has been a real source of comfort and financial security as we make our way through the troubling times of 2020. So if you're interested in saving money and frugal living, then make sure to continue watching.
The first thing I would suggest to do is track your spending so you can see where your money goes. At the beginning of my journey, I created a very simple Google spreadsheet where I logged what I spent every single day. Very soon, I realized that it was helpful to categorize the areas where my money went in order to identify where I was overspending. It quickly became clear that I was spending far more than I thought on experiences, gift giving, and lunch. When I realized what I was doing, I was able to make a conscious effort to either cut back or plan ahead for the amount of money I was spending in those areas. The next tip to help live below your means is to create a budget. Be firm but realistic with yourself when it comes to budgeting. What's your income? What are your non-negotiable outgoings? How much money do you want to spend on leisure? Etc. etc. Sitting down and doing the figures will give you a tight grip on your finances, and you'll know exactly where every penny is going, and it will allow you to plan to live below your means. The next tip is to go on a low buy no buy. If you're a regular viewer of my content, you will know that I have been on a low buy no buy since the beginning of 2019. A low buy no buy is a challenge where you commit to not spending any money on what you consider non-essential. Everyone's rules for their low buy no buy is different. Some are very strict, whereas others allow for a bit more flexibility. I veered toward the strict side and didn't allow myself to purchase any new clothes, makeup or shoes, but I did allow myself to buy replacements and to ask for new things as gifts when it was my birthday or the holidays. I've documented my low buy no buy in a series of videos on this channel, and I'll link those in the description below and also in the cards above. The great thing about a low buy no buy is that it can very quickly drive home to you how little you need in life. I realized that I didn't need a daily latte from the coffee shop. I didn't need multiple workout leggings when a couple were serving me just fine. And I didn't need backups of makeup when I had plenty left in the product I was currently using. The next thing to do is reduce down your direct debits. Log into your bank statements and look at all your fixed outgoings and ask yourself if there is anything that you can eliminate. At the beginning of my low buy no buy, I spent somewhere between £300 to £500 on regular monthly costs, but now I'm down to less than £100. I did this by cancelling several subscriptions and memberships as well as paying off a loan. I don't think I would have done all of that if I hadn't seriously been looking to cut down on my expenses. I'd always been aware that I spent £300 plus on my outgoings, but I'd been thinking of them as fixed costs rather than optional. And it was when I changed my perspective that I realized how much money I could actually save. The next tip I have is to be extremely wary of subscriptions. By themselves, each subscription to a service can be very little, but these subscriptions add up. I had subscriptions to Amazon Prime, Spotify and Kindle Unlimited, and over a year I was unthinkingly spending hundreds of pounds on these services that I hardly used. I do still have my subscription to Netflix, but that's worth it to me, as I use Netflix regularly enough to justify the cost. The others I can easily do without. The next thing is to cut cable or downsize your package. With so much programming available for free online, ask yourself if your cable package with all the bells and whistles is worth it to you, and whether you could live without it or at the very least downsize your package. When my husband and I moved in together, we decided to forego cable completely. Both of us love TV and Andrew really enjoys his sports, but even then we decided the premium cable package he had, costing over £150 per month, was simply not worth it to us. The next tip is to not upgrade your tech unless it really needs it. I think a lot of people have wised up to this, and not everyone is clamoring to get their hands on the newest iPhone as soon as it's released. The tech we have these days is incredible. We spend hundreds of pounds on them, and it's only right that they should last us a good few years before needing a replacement. The next tip is to find the best phone contract for your circumstances. I paid for my phone outright in order to avoid committing to a long contract with a mobile phone company. I then found a deal where I only paid £22 for unlimited data because I do pretty much everything online. Don't get sucked into an expensive 2-year phone contract before you do the sums. Work out if it's cheaper to buy the phone outright and then pay monthly for a package, or if indeed going the contract route is better for you. The next tip is to reduce your food budget by meal planning. I was very naive when it came to realizing the true cost of food. It was only when I was doing my daily log that I came to appreciate just how expensive food can be. Without meal planning in advance and just picking up whatever I fancied whenever I fancied it from the shops meant that I spent hundreds of pounds every month without realizing it. Then I had a chat with my mum who opened my eyes even more. She's an expert meal planner, and over the months when we have been in some sort of semi-lockdown situation owing to coronavirus, she has been buying the groceries for our household of 5 adults. She spends roughly £400 to £500 on groceries for the month, which covers all of our meals. So that's 3 meals per day across 30 days per month for the 5 of us. That's 450 meals, which means each meal ends up costing roughly £1. That's incredible value for money, and only made possible because she meal plans in advance and knows where all the best deals can be found. She doesn't do her shop in only one supermarket, but visits multiple supermarkets as well as farmers markets and separate butchers and specialist shops. It's a lot of effort, but the savings are significant. The next tip is to reduce your travel costs into work. The coronavirus has had a huge impact on the way we live and has opened our eyes to the possibilities of working remotely. Not only does this save on travel costs, but it's good for the environment, so it may be an idea, when things fully open up again, to try and negotiate some time working from home, and also to explore other ways to travel to work, i.e., could cycling to work be an option? The next tip is to save money on utilities. I used to be incredibly daunted when it came to this, as I had visions of myself having to sit with a pen and paper and do lots of complicated calculations and cost comparisons between different utility companies. But I'd completely over-exaggerated the complexity of the task in my head. All you need to do to save money on utilities is take advantage of a reputable price comparison and switching service website. You'll need to input a few meter readings and they will do the rest for you. One issue that you may encounter with these services is that they are quick to offer you another deal within a few months of you switching, but don't be tempted to switch at every opportunity. Compare the tariffs between your provider and the new suggested provider, and you will be able to tell if they are truly offering a better deal or not. The next tip is to buy second-hand where possible. I've recently become an advocate for buying second-hand after purchasing a few things from friends and Facebook Marketplace, all of which turned out to be great investments. The next tip is to entertain at home. I live in London and it's an expensive city, so one of the best ways of saving money is to entertain friends and family at home rather than going out. You can lay out an extravagant feast and have plenty of alcohol flowing, all for a fraction of the cost for doing something equivalent at a restaurant or bar. The next tip is to start a side hustle or get a part-time job. Both of these suggestions take time and commitment, but financially they could be very rewarding. Maybe you could teach English in your spare time. Perhaps you have a spare room you can rent out. Maybe you have free time on the weekends to do some dog walking. I have a video on this channel which lists side hustles you can explore, and if this is something you're interested in, I'll leave the video linked in the description below and also in the cards above. My own personal side hustle are my 2 YouTube channels. Being a social media content creator can be very creatively rewarding, but a word of warning, it can take a long while to reap any financial benefits. If starting a YouTube channel is something that you fancy, then I'll also link a video where I talk more in depth about my journey in the description below and also in the cards above. The next tip is to get into the habit of refunding items. I used to be terrible at this, but my low buy no buy forced me to take a good long look at my bad financial habits. If I bought anything that I was disappointed with in the past, I rarely refunded the item because I couldn't face the hassle of dealing with the refund. Instead, I tried to make do with whatever I'd bought and would try and use it regardless, even though that always turned out to be a fruitless effort. So in the end, I pulled myself up by the bootstraps and stopped being such a wimp when it came to refunds. And I found that the minor inconvenience of getting my refund is worth every effort as I get my hard-earned money back into my account. The next tip is to redefine your definition of rich. It's okay to want nice things and to strive for the future, but it doesn't mean you need to be discontent with what you currently have. Take the time to be grateful for all the good that surrounds you. Recognize the riches that you already have, and it will have a huge impact on your attitude to saving money and living within your means, as you won't always be thinking about wanting more. The next tip is to borrow and share. After embarking on my low buy no buy, I've had to think about alternative ways to get access to items that I need temporarily. My first port of call is always my sister. She's stocked me up with samples she no longer wants, and she's lent me clothes and jewelry for one-off occasions. The next tip is to always have a cooling off period before buying something. If you're trying to live below your means, it's a good idea to avoid impulse shopping like the plague. If you want something, then impose a cooling off period for yourself so you have the time and space to really consider if you want to go ahead with the purchase or not. Often you may forget about the item or think better about really needing it, so it's wise to incorporate this habit when it comes to shopping. Even if things are on sale and in limited supply, and there's a chance that your cooling off period might mean that you lose out, it's often better to sometimes lose out than make a rash decision you weren't ready for. The next tip is to filter out advertising as much as you can. If you get triggered to spend money because of promotions and ads in marketing emails and on your social media, then simply unsubscribe from those emails and change your ad preferences to minimize temptation. The next tip is to invest in your health. Getting sick can be expensive, even if you're lucky enough to live in a country with a free national healthcare system. You may have to buy medication, you may be out of work for a bit, which can impact your earnings, and generally feeling down when unwell makes us take our eye off the ball when it comes to budgeting and living frugally. Take the time to invest in your health, eat well, exercise regularly, make sure you pay attention to your mental health. All of this will impact your overall well-being, allowing you to face the world and show up for yourself. The next tip is to get into the habit of saving. Incorporate regular saving into your budget as a non-negotiable. On payday, deposit a set amount into your savings account and build up an emergency fund for the future. You'll be grateful for that financial cushion should something unexpected happen. The next tip is to stop comparing yourself to others. This is easier said than done, but it's an important habit to cultivate. Comparing yourself to others, especially others who are wealthier than you and able to flash the cash, may lead to discontentment and overspending in your own life. Remember to keep your eyes firmly on your future goals and ignore what everyone else is doing along the way. The only person you should compare yourself to is you from yesterday. The next tip is not to get taken in by get-rich-quick schemes. Get-rich-quick schemes prey on people's hopes and dreams and can be extremely exploitative, so be wary of anything that sounds too good to be true. Online courses that promise to make you rich overnight are just scams and you don't need them. Put in the time and effort and you'll be a success in your own right. The next tip is to be brutally honest with yourself about what you can and can't afford. Knowing what you can and can't afford is really important when it comes to living within your means. For example, I would love to one day own a designer handbag, but if I'm brutally honest with myself, there is no way that I can afford to spend thousands of pounds on a bag. There are things in my life that are a much higher priority. The next tip is to not use retail therapy to get you through tough times. Although it's fine to treat yourself to a pick-me-up coffee or takeaway if you're feeling down, it's wise not to routinely use treats like these to alleviate feelings of boredom, loneliness, depression, or unhappiness. It's important to tackle any deeper issues head-on and not use retail therapy, as it will only be a temporary fix. The next tip is to be wary of sales. If you've been eyeing something in particular for a while and it happens to go on sale at a good discount, then you should snap it up, but otherwise you should be wary of sales. The seasonal sales in big department stores are selling stock that have been sitting on the shelves for a while and that they've not been able to shift for one reason or another. These products and garments have often been handled by multiple people, and there's a reason why they haven't been sold, so be careful of thinking you've got a good bargain when you might not have. And sale shopping also doesn't necessarily mean you've saved money. If you weren't intending to buy the item full price and have only been moved to complete the purchase because of the sale, then you're still parting with money that you wouldn't have otherwise. The next tip is to try to repair before you replace. Repairing items is often cheaper and more sustainable than replacing an item, so try and see if you can extend the lifespan of your possessions in this way. The next tip is to resist being a two-car household. Cars are incredibly convenient, but they are also incredibly expensive and bad for the environment. The best way to get around is obviously walking, cycling, and using public transport. But if you do need a car, then try and limit it to one vehicle for your household if possible. Plan your family's journeys ahead of time. Look into carpooling with neighbors and impress upon your family the financial and environmental benefits of having one car over two. The next tip is to think about the size of your home. Living in London, this isn't really a big issue for the average person as our houses aren't that big. However, in different parts of the country and around the world, large houses can be snapped up at much more affordable prices. But just because you can afford it doesn't mean you should always get it. Does a family of 4 really need a 6-bedroom house with 2 garages? Is the cost of running such a large space really worth it? How much money would downsizing save? Think about those questions when evaluating where you choose to live. The next tip is to avoid online shopping as a form of relaxation. Try and find other ways to do that. Maybe find a creative hobby that will take up your time and attention and get you into a flow state that can be just as relaxing and rewarding as online shopping, if not more so. The next tip is to plan ahead for big expenses such as upcoming birthdays and the holidays. These events can become very expensive, but if planned for months ahead of time, you can absorb the cost in increments and still give everyone lovely presents without breaking the bank. The next tip is to declutter your home and sell what you don't need. This is a great way to generate some extra cash very quickly. When I played the Minimalism game back in 2019, I decluttered hundreds of items. If you don't know what the Minimalism game is, it's when a person declutters over the course of a month. On day 1, they get rid of 1 item. On day 2, they get rid of 2 items. On day 3, it's 3 items, etc., etc. By the end of the month, depending on how many days there are in that month, they will have decluttered anywhere from 406 to 496 items. After I played the game, I sold many of my things online with the help of my sister, and together we generated quite the chunk of change. The next tip is to cut and color your own hair. Regular cuts and colors from the salon can get expensive, so if you can learn how to cut and maintain your own hair, you can make quite the saving. There are plenty of YouTube tutorials out there that can help you, and if you don't feel confident to do it all yourself the first time round, then you can always call on a friend to come and help. The next tip is to look for deals on beauty treatments and experiences. I discovered this trick while on my low buy no buy. Given the lifestyle I had committed to, I couldn't justify expensive beauty treatments and day outs. But that didn't mean that I wanted to eliminate them from my life completely. That's when I hit upon the idea of using discount sites to see if I could get good deals on things like massages and afternoon teas. And I did. And it also had the added advantage of allowing me to discover places in London I never would have known about. The next tip is to eat less meat, sweets, and alcohol. All of these are very expensive when compared to other food items and drink, and cutting back even a little will make a difference to your wallet. The next tip is to eat leftovers. Make your meals go even further by making sure to eat leftovers. This, along with meal planning and cutting back on more expensive food items, will help to make significant savings. The next tip is to choose water over other drinks. Water can cost nothing as opposed to fizzy drinks and alcohol, so try and choose it as your default. This is especially good for children. If you can get them into the habit of drinking water over other options, it will stand them in good stead as they grow up. The next tip is to refinance your loans to save on interest. A debt payoff journey is stressful enough as it is, and you don't need to be swimming against the tide by paying off high interest on loans as well as the principal. Consolidate and refinance your loans to reduce down the interest you're paying, and embark on an aggressive debt payoff plan as possible. The next tip is to explore store brand options. Store brand options can be just as good, if not better, than name brand options, so it's important to be open-minded when you shop and try cheaper alternatives to see if you like them better. The next tip is to wear your clothes more than once before washing. Unless you've been sweating, it's normally perfectly possible to wear your clothes more than once before putting them into the laundry. Save on electricity and water by reducing the amount of laundry you do. The next tip is to skip regular lattes from coffee shops and instead make your own. This might seem like a small saving, but trust me, this builds up. I used to grab a coffee on my way to work every day. And once I stopped this, my savings snowballed because by making that small decision to switch to instant and the free coffee available at my workplace, I made a saving first thing in the morning, and it set me up to continue in that same vein for the rest of the day. The next tip is to use a programmable thermostat. My father-in-law swears by this tip. He's very sensible with money and has a great life in retirement, and he's someone whose money mindset I admire greatly. By using a programmable thermostat, he's able to keep a good grip on his energy bills while keeping his home a comfortable temperature for everyone. The next tip is to go reusable where you can. For example, swap over from paper towels to cloth towels in the kitchen. While you may pay an upfront cost for the reusable version, you'll save money in the long run. The next tip is to buy in bulk, but only if it makes sense. If products that you regularly use or consume are being offered on deals, then by all means take advantage. However, bulk buying does mean that you will need to compromise some of your space to store things. Also, retailers will often have deals on unhealthy treats, and bulk buying these items aren't the best idea because not only is it bad for your health, it's also bad for your wallet as it encourages you to buy more of these items than you otherwise might have. The next tip is to not buy bottled water if you're lucky enough to live in a country where you can drink tap. Buying bottled water is just a waste of money in those circumstances. The next tip is to switch to LED light bulbs. LED light bulbs are more energy efficient and last longer than traditional light bulbs, thus reducing energy bills. The next tip is to turn off switches at the sockets when not using an appliance. When appliances like TVs are turned off using the remote, they aren't truly off. They are in standby mode and still using up electricity. The worst culprits for this type of energy consumption are not only TVs, but game consoles, idle computers, phones, tablets and laptops on charge, set-top boxes and recorders. The next tip is to shop your stash. I did this a lot during my low buy no buy. Whenever I needed something, I didn't automatically go and buy it. Instead, I had to look to what I already had to see if I could repurpose something that could do the job. This allowed me to rediscover clothes and shoes and use up all the random makeup samples and mini travel toiletries I had accumulated over the years. The next tip is to go shopping by yourself. I love this tip. If you need to shop for an item, then try to go shopping by yourself. Very often, if you go shopping with friends who aren't of the same frugal mindset, they will encourage you to make purchases that you might not be 100% sure of. And because you don't want to spend ages in the shop running through the pros and cons of whether or not you should buy the item, you may get rushed into a decision before you're ready. If you're trying to live below your means, avoid making shopping a leisure activity with friends and find some other way to spend your time together. And the last tip to living below your means is to stay inspired by following frugal living social media accounts. Frugal living and saving money can be incredibly rewarding just by itself, but we all need a little additional inspiration here and there. And one of the best places to get that is through seeking out social media content that aligns with your values and goals.
And that brings me to the end of my list of 50 ways to live below your means. If you enjoy minimalism, frugal living and wealth building content, I will leave a list of videos that you might enjoy in the description below and also in the cards above. As always guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video helpful and inspirational. Make sure to subscribe because it really does help my channel, and I'll see you all next week. Bye!